And good evening, amigos. It is a beautiful, what is it, first day of November here in the Midwest, and Halloween is now officially behind us. We're looking for Thanksgiving. It's about time for all of us to be present in our lives and give thanks for the amazing journey that we are all engaged with. And there will be, I'm sure, experiences coming up in the future for you as well as for myself that are going to be quite miraculous, and that's what we're talking about, miracles. So, and hi Margaret, I see Margaret's just joined us, and this is what we're talking about, A Course in Miracles, how to have a miracle happen in your life. And that's really not a huge event in many instances, because it comes quite naturally once you start to listen to your inner voice and start to negate the brain chatter, get rid of what the ego is constantly trying to convince you is real, because ultimately we will leave this world behind. And when we go to the next stage of our unfoldment, if we put in the effort to make ourselves right, to adjust our sails and set off on a course for a heavenly destination, then we will undoubtedly be able to arrive at a place where miracles are no longer needed, where we're living in that constant state of grace. So, to pick up from where we were last week, I'll start off with a little bit of insight from the text, and then I go to a couple of lessons. And we had been looking at Chapter 2, the separation and the atonement, and trying to fully grasp what the idea of atonement actually constitutes. And, there's the old at-one-ment dialogue floating around there. But once we start to actually zero in on the bottom level, the ground floor of truth, there is a surrender that has to occur. In order for the atonement to happen, you have to stop being you. In other words, this identity, this ego that you have created, has to slowly dissolve. And we do this in, tiny steps. But whenever we can go into that silence, that place where no thought is occurring, then we can reclaim a little bit more of our truth. So God knows nothing of an ego, and we certainly can't drag our ego into the kingdom of heaven, because once again we are going to that place of absolute total union. And within that, there is an ecstatic state that we arrive at. And so it's a long journey back, but it is one that once you get beat up by life in this realm enough, it becomes the major focus of your existence. I can't imagine having any other career other than to be a student and teacher of A Course in Miracles, because that's the only reward that is worthy of me as a child of God, and that's true for you also. So hopefully you will get out there and start investing in understanding what A Course in Miracles is presenting to us, and eventually in your own ministry, in your own journey through life, be able to share these insights with others. So going into this next stage here, we're looking at Section 5, the function of the miracle worker, and that's us. We're miracle workers. So we have to be willing to take on that obligation, because the only way we can grow into the Course or return ourselves to an awareness of the truth of our reality, that we live and move and have our being in God, is to really embrace this idea of becoming a teacher, becoming somebody who is a miracle worker in the material world. And we're going to go a little bit further. Last time we were talking about mindfulness and magic, and looking at magic for what it really is. It's simply putting a Band-Aid on an existing problem, but not removing the problem. And the avenue for the removal of the problem, we have learned, is through the act of forgiveness. And really, from my experience, forgiveness works in a very mysterious way, because if we release ourselves to the Holy Spirit and actually surrender whatever it is that we're conscious or unconsciously burdened with, and frequently we are, in fact, very much unconscious of what the real issue is, the activity of the Holy Spirit will uproot the issue and bring a healing into the situation. And you have to be willing to, once again, step out of the ego, step out of saying, oh, I know this is what the problem is. We have to arrive at a point where we ask our higher self to reveal what the real issue actually is. And often that can be very surprising. It says, the healer who relies on his own readiness is endangering his understanding. You are perfectly safe as long as you are completely unconcerned about your readiness. So you can't prepare yourself for this. You have to step into this state of grace and acceptance. And your ego is always going to have agendas, and always going to try to derail your efforts. So you have to be on guard. You have to be mindful of what is actually happening in this process. It says you are completely safe as long as you are completely unconcerned about your readiness, but maintain a consistent trust in mind. And that, of course, is Jesus, who was the one who was the voice of A Course in Miracles. If your miracle working inclinations are not functioning properly, it is always because fear has intruded on your right-mindedness and turned it upside down. All forms of not right-mindedness are the result of refusal to accept the atonement for yourself. If you do not accept it, you are in a position to recognize that those who need healing are simply those who have not realized that right-mindedness is healing. The sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself or herself. This means you recognize that mind is the only creative level, and that its errors are healed by the atonement. Once you accept this, your mind can only heal. So we do have that impact on the world that we are surrounded by. As we accept the atonement, as we step into that state of unity with God, it has the effect of transforming our vision, our comprehension of those around us. And we begin more and more and more to witness people as they were created by God, and not as we have reinvented them to be. And, you know, this is once again where we get back to those ideas of oneness, because within the sonship, or within the collective consciousness here in this realm of trial and error and upset and upheaval, we are striving to abandon all these old ideas about who the people around us are. Pardon me. And in proportion to our ability to step out of that commitment that the ego has made to have heroes and villains in the world you inhabit, that's where we find that we actually have an impact. It comes from within us, and as we witness it, the sacredness of the individuals that we are interacting with, it lifts them up. It helps them gain a little bit higher level. So it's a very easy process, but again, the ego is constantly in resistance and is always confrontational with the avenues that we are taking to correct the misthoughts that have created the world that we are experiencing. And from my experience, from what I am observing in my own life, is that these are all just steps to an ultimate state of true unity. So we have to get ready to abandon the idea of laws of karma, cause and effect, because that's the mundane world. As soon as you're working on that level, as soon as you want vengeance or revenge or justice, those things carry you off and distract you from the central theme of the journey that we are on. And then at the next level, we have the recognition of mind, and we get enwrapped in that idea of manifestation, using the mind to manifest healing, using the mind to manifest financial gain, using the mind for all these different purposes. And once again, that becomes a distraction. So when you are finally targeted on the real goal, you will suddenly recognize that all of the things that your ego, that your conscious thinking is trying to urge you to do is counterproductive to the task that is truly at hand. And that task is to slide into a state of absolute unity. Because when you get rid of the ego, all that's left is God. So you have merged into the truth of your identity, which is that you are one with God. You are God in manifestation. And in that state of consciousness, you're not going to have health issues. You're not going to have financial issues. You're not going to have issues at all. Because repeatedly throughout the New Testament and throughout A Course in Miracles and all the other writings that you will come across, Jesus repeatedly tells us that seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things, all of your needs, all of the things in life that you truly desire will be added unto you. So going to God with a list of I need and I want is pretty much going to nail the door shut. You're not going to be able to gain access to any real state of enlightened experience. You're going to have to give up those plans. You're going to have to give up all of the things that you absolutely believe are a necessity for you, because something greater awaits you, something bigger, something more rewarding, something more fulfilling, something that will bring you to a state of exuberance, because you're embracing life on the largest playing field that exists. And that's a hard concept for your ego to accommodate. So you will get a lot of resistance to any attempt to surrender the things that you think you believe in, and just ask God, reveal thyself to me. Because once you do that, once you allow the divine to reveal itself to you, guess what happens? You discover, oh, that's me. That's who I am. I am that divine being. And that's the cure-all for every ill that we have on the planet right now. So every time a miracle worker makes any kind of effort to release these long-cherished beliefs about, oh, these people over here are all wrong, and if only God will help me I'll go over and straighten them out. That agenda has to go. That has to go out the back door. And you have to be willing to allow yourself to be placed where you're supposed to be doing your work. And often, I know with myself, I have found that when that occurs, when I get placed by my connection to the Holy Spirit, something magical occurs, something amazing occurs. And my life takes on new depth and new tone and new texture. And I think that's what really all of us are looking for, is to surmount these limited desires that we have and to immerse ourselves in spirit and allow ourselves to become a tool, to become the pen, so that the word can be written and shared with this mortal clan that we have adopted or have managed to manifest as part of who we are. So that's looking at the text. And now we'll take a look at some of the lessons. We had been looking at lesson 17, 18, and 19. And now we're going to take a look here at reaffirming vision over sight. If you remember last week, we were talking about how there are two different levels to experience life on. The first is sight, which is a process of the physical body. It's basically a veil that we have created to keep us from witnessing the truth of those around us. So whatever your eyes can see is going to be an illusion. The eyes were designed to create illusion. And we have to be willing to go to that deeper level of accepting the idea of vision, which incorporates spiritual knowing and incorporates a non-corporeal approach to viewing the world that we're inhabiting. And that's one of the beautiful things about the way A Course in Miracles and all other truly spiritual texts direct us, is to no longer rely on the physical senses, but to begin to give allowance to the idea of using vision to become part of the journey to shared being. In other words, you're no longer looking at the sunset, you are the sunset. You are no longer looking at the people around you. You recognize true oneness, and you realize that you are the people who are around you in the most literal sense. So that's what the lessons start off with very early in the series of lessons, preparing us to be able to see the world through a whole different set of sensory input, or most literally non-sensory input, because it gets us ready, it prepares us to shift gears and become part of something much bigger, much more vast. So lesson 20 says, I am determined to see. We have been quite casual about our practice periods thus far. There have been virtually no attempt to direct the time for undertaking them. Minimal effort has been required, and not even active cooperation and interest have been asked. This approach has been intentional and very carefully planned. We have not lost sight of the crucial importance of the reversal of your thinking. The salvation of the world depends on it. So you are a key element. And never diminish yourself. Never allow your ego to diminish you. Our ego is always saying, well, what can I do? And yada, yada, yada. But the truth is that you are an element in this process that is indispensable. So when you're sitting around with, with the ego having a pity party, you're really diminishing yourself to the level of nothingness. The truth is that God has a plan. You are part of the plan for the restoration of the sanity of all of us who appear to be trapped in this material world. So never discredit yourself from the role that you are playing in this realm. It says, this is our first attempt to introduce structure. Do not misconstrue it as an effort to exert force or pressure. You want salvation. You want to be happy. You want peace. You do not have them now because your mind is totally undisciplined and you cannot distinguish between joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, love and fear. You are now learning how to tell them apart by participating and doing the lessons, and great indeed will be your reward. So now we're starting to actually realize that in order for any of this stuff to work, we do have to have a very serious commitment to implementing the program. So the beginnings, the first 20 lessons are a fracturing and a breaking apart of our set vision, our set goals, our set understandings. All of the desires and beliefs and opinions that we have cherished for so long have to be shaken up. And we were not being called upon to put a huge amount of effort into structure and into any kind of discipline. But now we're arriving at a pivotal point here where the Course is telling us that it's time for us now to actually create a game plan, to actually have a sense of this needs to happen next. So once again, allowing Jesus, the voice of the Course, to direct us, it says, your decision to see is all that vision requires. What you want is yours. Do not mistake the little effort that is asked of you for an indication that our goal is of little worth. Can the salvation of the world be a trivial purpose? And can the world be saved if you are not? That's an interesting thought. In other words, there's a contingency factor here. In order for the world to be saved, you're the one who has to be saved. And I think that that's something that a lot of people, when they're working with the lessons, they don't put a lot of attention on that. And this is not causing you to indulge your ego, become narcissistic. Later on in the Course, we will discover areas where there's discussion about the difference between grandeur and grandiosity. And when we are living in our spiritual truth, when we are living in our Christ consciousness, we are a being that exhibits the greatest grandeur imaginable. When we are residing in our ego, it's all grandiosity. And that in current times, in our current society, is something that you don't really need to put any effort into witnessing. Just look around and you'll see it everywhere. So we really have to be true to ourselves and love ourselves and respect ourselves and cherish ourselves. But to know that that self is not this arrogant, self-obsessed, and completely disconnected from truth identity that we have created for ourselves. So your decision to see all that vision requires. What you want is yours. Do not mistake the little effort that is asked of you for an indication that our goal is of little worth. Can the salvation of the world be a trivial purpose? And can the world be saved if you are not? God has one Son, and he is the resurrection and the life. His will is done because all power is given him in heaven and on earth. In your determination to see is vision given to you. So, rereading that one section there, reinforcing the truth that you are a divine expression of God and that all power is given unto you. And that's pretty astonishing, a statement of that nature. But if we go back and look at the records of the activities of Jesus and the activities of other enlightened souls, it's not uncommon for us to see the physical manifestations that we identify as being miracles, which is walking on water and calming the storms and turning water into wine. All of those things are very much ego-based, and they are an outpicturing, a secondary effect of the truth of what our true nature is. But when we are stepping into our Christhood, we have dominion over everything, absolutely everything, because we are no longer separate in our belief from God. And we know that God is that which rectifies everything. God doesn't try to manipulate things. God isn't an entity who is committed to this meandering through the world and trying to put things right with this world that we see. Once God's presence is witnessed and brought into this world, everything that is wrong naturally adjusts itself. God doesn't have to do that. Merely the presence of God is that much of a force that it impacts the world that we are inhabiting. So overall, the desirability of continuing to put effort into understanding A Course in Miracles is very, very important, because it does restore you to the truth of who you are. And it assists you in reclaiming the power of who you are and what you want to do. In addition, I also mentioned in this segment here, where I think it's segment number 9, if I remember correctly, and there is a book out there on the shelves. Sometimes the course can be a little dense. Sometimes you have to read it, reread it, and reread it in order to get that little nugget of understanding. But if you want to enhance your growth and your learning, go pick up a book by a fellow by the name of Joel Goldsmith, and it's called The Thunder of Silence. And I would suggest that you read that book along with A Course in Miracles and allow the two to kind of counterpoint each other. And I guarantee that you will have some astonishing experiences as we continue to move forward on this goal of reclaiming the truth of who we are, reclaiming our power and place in the world. So it is 8:30, and I'm going to dash on off. I will be here 1 week from today discussing this next section of A Course in Miracles. And this is going to be an ongoing journey, because as you can see, we're not like zipping through here without getting a little bit inclusive in the dialogue and trying to cover all the bases. But much love to all of you. Get out there, share the love, pass the love around, and I will speak to you in 1 week.